Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar, and welcome to this webinar on barriers and opportunities to broader adoption of integrated demand-side management efforts at electric utilities. This webinar is a co-presentation of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. The research that's being presented here and that this webinar is based on, a report, has been funded by the U.S. Department of Energy Strategic Programs Office. I'm Liz Stewart. I'm one of the co-authors of the report that this webinar is based on. We also have with us Pete Kappers, a co-author, and Jennifer Potter, the lead author of the report, and she will lead the webinar. So before we start, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online. I believe, is that right, Pete?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. And we have a lot of attendees, some of whom are just still joining us now. So we're going to keep the audio lines on mute. So when you have questions, please enter them through the chat window, and we will stop periodically to answer the questions. And if you have any problems logging on or anything, you can also chat that in the window, and we'll see if we can help you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny Potter, who's going to lead the webinar. And Jenny, I can forward the slides for you. So take it away, Jenny.
All right, that sounds great. We might battle for slide control. So
no, that's fine. If you want to do it, that's fine too.
Yeah, no worries. Either way works. So yeah, my name is Jenny Potter. I am a ex-Lawrence Berkeley National Lab employee. I left the lab about 3 months ago to join Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, and I have worked closely with Pete and Liz on this project for many months. So we're excited to be here today to produce and provide these results to you, and give you an overview of what we found with the utility and program administrators. And so without further ado, let's get into the outline for our presentation. We're going to begin with an introduction and overview of demand-side management in general, and also integrated demand-side management. We'll discuss the motivations and the benefits of those utilities and program administrators that are currently pursuing integrated demand-side management. We'll then leap into the regulatory and utility barriers for implementation of integrated demand-side management. And then we'll talk about the actions taken by the utilities and program administrators to implement IDSM despite barriers. Finally, we'll focus on the future opportunities for expanding IDSM portfolios and what those portfolios might be comprised of in terms of technologies. So demand side, when we talk about demand side management, demand side refers to the activities that involve the end use customers' energy usage as opposed to the supply side, which typically refers to utility energy generation, transmission, and distribution activities. The original objective of demand-side management was to provide cost-effective demand-side energy and capacity resources to defer the need for new power generation facilities and power purchases and upgrades to infrastructure in the transmission and distribution circuits. We defined, we've sort of taken the demand-side management definition and evolved it into what's presented here, and this is what our underlying tone is for the rest of the presentation, and that's that demand-side management, or DSM, which I'll refer to throughout the rest of the presentation as DSM, is the planning and the implementation of programs that are designed to influence electric and gas utility customer uses of energy in ways that will produce the desired changes in the utilities or customer's energy profile. So pretty much what we're used to. We're pretty good at demand-side management in the industry. So we can examine the current buckets of DSM and the program offerings. We can put them in pretty concisely in 5 different buckets. Beginning at the bottom left-hand side, we can talk that the first would be demand response. And these are programs that incentivize customers to change their load profile, usually paying incentives for participating in the programs. Then energy efficiency are programs that are incentivized that incentivize the deployment of technologies that use less energy. And then we've bucketed distributed generation and storage into one circle up here that at the top. Those programs are designed to incentivize customers to adopt different distributed generation technologies, including photovoltaics or fuel cells, and of course battery storage. And then we have electric vehicles, and these are programs we've seen utilities begin implementing electric vehicle programs that encourage the deployment of smart electric vehicle chargers or smart electric vehicles, and trying to really manage how those types of resources are going to impact their local grid. And then finally, last but not least, and one of my personal favorites, is time-based rates. These are electricity rates that are paid by customers that vary depending on the day or the time of the day, and then oftentimes events such as critical peak pricing when there's a contingency event at a utility. So we have seen over time that policymakers, legislators, and regulators have enacted quite a number of policies to encourage demand-side management. And this graphic is intended to depict that demand-side management is really a central tenet to each one of these types of policies that are listed in these 5 bubbles. Just to begin, we have energy efficiency resource standards. This is a fairly common one. We have 24 states that have enacted energy efficiency resource standards, or EERS. Those focus on setting long-term energy savings targets for utilities or third-party administrators that must be met through EE programs. So states can set similar standards for other types of technologies, such as renewable portfolio standards for renewable energy. And then next, we can consider integrated resource planning as also DSM being a central component of integrated resource planning. Integrated resource planning is a utility plan for meeting forecasted annual and energy demand. And plus, it usually includes some established reserve margin. But the idea with an IRP or an integrated resource plan is that it's using a combination of supply side and demand side resources over a future period. And that demand side is really where you see some of the more forward thinking in the integrated resource planning process. There are about 34 states that have introduced or expanded the use of long-term integrated resource planning. And so this is actually quite popular, and we're seeing the majority of states use policies like this in order to encourage DSM. We also have loading order. So some policymakers have called for a prioritization of demand-side resources and electricity resource planning efforts. In California in 2003, energy agencies introduced a loading order, and they literally call it the loading order for electricity resources, that calls for decreasing its per capita energy demand via energy efficiency first, demand response activities second, and then meeting new generation needs with renewables and distributed energy resources before considering any new generation from fossil fuel resources. So that's another method to get demand-side management out there. And then, so once utility planning efforts have identified specific needs on their system that demand-side management can help address, such as deferring distribution system upgrades or managing the impact of generation retirements, utilities can procure any or all demand-side management technologies available to meet that particular grid need cost-effectively. And this is what we typically call non-wires alternatives. As a recent example, we have several states, like California, New York, Washington, Massachusetts, and Maine, have or are pursuing non-wires alternative opportunities to address low growth and aging infrastructure. And so they're using DSM to defer or replace specific equipment upgrades. And this is really exciting. I'm a big fan of that. And really, if you think about non-wires alternatives, when we move to integrated demand-side management, non-wires alternatives is sort of an umbrella which integrated demand-side management exists under. They're very similar in nature. In integrated demand-side management is the idea of promoting integrating demand-side management programs. The main topic of our report here, if you think about IDSM at a conceptual level, it's a strategic approach to designing and delivering a portfolio of demand-side management programs to customers that provide both a benefit to the participating customers through lower bills and to non-participants by the resource benefits, such as in the non-wires alternatives, where we're deferring some type of investment in the infrastructure. IDSM programs typically deliver customer-centric strategies with the goal of increasing the amount of DSM in the field, but doing so in a way that does integrate various measures and technologies to improve the collective performance of those technologies and the penetration of the demand-side measures. So just to be clear, for the purpose of this study, we refer to customer-centric as focusing on customer-specific needs, either individually or within a larger group that shares similar demographic or energy use load profiles. So, but that concept of customer-centric is really important to integrated demand-side management and the definition that we've described and come up with here. So we went out to a group of utilities and practitioners and ESCOs within the industry and asked for them to help assist defining integrated demand-side management. And we did this because there are so many definitions floating out. Is it integrated demand-side management? Is it integrated distributed energy resources? And really, we wanted to hone in on a definition that we could use consistently throughout the report and hopefully introduce to the industry that would be something that would be aspirational and forward-looking, as well as really capturing the meat and potatoes of this. One of the things to note is that we don't use integrated distributed energy resources. We actually, for the purpose of our paper, chose to adopt the NERC definition of distributed energy resources, or DERS, which is it actually requires, or the definition includes that it can distribute or can generate electricity or serve energy to the grid under the NERC definition. So we consider a DER like a distributed generation or a storage. So that's one of the distinguishing things I want to make sure that so this paper really does deviate from sort of the meshing of those two definitions. So our respondents had defined this as the integration and coordination of delivery for 3 or more of energy efficiency, demand response, distributed generation, storage, electric vehicles, and or time of use-based rate programs that are provided to residential and commercial electric utility customers. So most programs currently identified within the concept of IDSM only integrate 2 DSM measures, namely energy efficiency and demand response. So we really did find, for our purposes though, we did define this concept of IDSM, recognizing that its application at present is pretty limited. And so once again, this is really a forward-thinking sort of aspirational type definition when thinking about demand-side management. It's hard to actually get 3 measures in there. So this graphic depicts that those 5 demand-side management type programs really do fall within this bubble of integrated demand-side management. And so we do need to have multiple measures coming out in order for it to qualify as IDSM. In an IDSM program, a customer is often offered marketing materials and rebates, incentives, or financing for measures that integrate with other measures that can be installed together as one package simultaneously or as interconnected measures. There are some utility programs out there that we surveyed that offer IDSM, but a lot of them offer a smart thermostat program. And a lot of times this is just an energy efficiency rebate along with a DR incentive on top. But unless it's coupled with a time-based rate, it really wouldn't be considered IDSM within our current definition. But there are many utilities that are doing smart thermostat IDSM programs. They do couple the technology with time-based rates. In California in particular, the utilities are really focused on IDSM and new construction, whereas like Con Edison, which is focused on IDSM in retrofits for targeted areas such as the Brooklyn, Queens area. And they've been very successful with this. There's also in Hawaii, and there's been grid integrated water heaters that have been piloted that are also aspiring to IDSM. And so as mentioned, though, despite some of I just mentioned a few utility programs, but we really do have limited experience within the industry of this. So those programs that we talked about are really important and significant. They're contributing a lot to the industry by kind of breaking new ground with their innovation. This graphic depicts some of the states that have initiatives and that are moving towards IDSM. California obviously has been working on this since 2009. They began because they were focusing on the duck curve, and a lot of their efforts are focused on the duck curve. So they're trying to avoid, overgeneration of renewables during the middle of the day, and they've been designing programs that are intended to address some of those constraints. And there's in Hawaii, there's current DR dockets and DER initiatives that are looking towards IDSM to provide grid services and resources. There's also some collaboration between the program administrator and the utility there to carry out hot water or grid integrated water heater programs, so that we're really maximizing the value of those resources. Colorado has also initiated some performance-based utility regulation. And Massachusetts is very far down the road with non-wires alternatives. They're sort of setting the precedence with New York in terms of getting multiple measures with one sort of customer-centric and grid-specific goal in mind. So there are some industry leaders that we're looking to help us define where we're going in the future.
Hey, Jenny. We had a couple of questions come in. A couple from Ted Jones, and his most recent question, which was asked kind of during your last few minutes, was he said IDSM for residential and commercial customers, but not industrial customers? ? Wonder why that is. I think when we say commercial, we mean commercial industrial, right? So
yes. Yeah, we do. And so sorry that wasn't clear.
And also earlier Ted asked how many states have loading order requirements, and I think I'll have to look that up. I mean, obviously California is a leader in that regard. Do you know offhand or?
No, I actually don't. I'd have to look that up as well.
Yeah,
I know that Hawaii. I know that Hawaii is investigating a loading order as well, but I think, but yeah, I'm not sure how many other states actually have a loading order.
Got it.
California is very loud about theirs, which is great.
We'll see if we can find out for you, Ted.
Great. Thanks for the questions, Ted.
Sure. Go ahead.
So our intent of the study was to collect respondents' perspectives on the most important drivers for implementing integrated demand-side management. So that was identifying the benefits of IDSM that are materializing or showing the potential to materialize. In addition, we sought to highlight specific identified barriers to broader IDSM implementation that falls under the purview of either the regulators or program administrators, and identify specific actions that program administrators have taken in order to expand the delivery of IDSM within their service territories. So we surveyed and interviewed from a sample of 9 DSM program administrators and program implementers who were currently implementing or had attempted to implement an integrated demand-side management program. There were 8 utilities, 2 third-party program implementers, and 3 ESCOs who agreed to participate in the study. So it's important to note that while the focus of this study is on the electric utility IDSM efforts from these interviews, we did conduct it with a small sample of utilities and 1 program implementer. So this narrowly focuses our viewpoints that are presented herein, and we're aware of that. So but this is a scoping study. So, but do keep that in mind as we proceed.
And I'm going to stop for one more question here from Franklin Neubauer. So Franklin asks, the ISO implements loading order, right? Question mark?
No.
And the answer is no.
No. Yeah.
in California, right. It's basically the Energy Commission, the state's energy office, the CPUC, and then I think another organization, right, the Power Authority, some other authority that established the loading order.
Yeah, so it's legislative, and then the PUC is responsible for implementing it. So they're regulating that.
Great.
Good question. Great. So in our interviews with the various participants of this study, we heard that IDSM portfolios can help balance different objectives, such as delivering the right type of demand-side management so that it's benefiting their distribution system needs, and then also giving customers more choice and more control. There's a balance that needs to include the utility's ability to meet the regulatory mandates for EE, DR, DG, all of which have different installed capacity goals. They have different demand and energy reduction targets. Many utilities stated that the IDSM portfolios have given them the ability to balance those numerous objectives within their organization, since they have a more holistic approach to DSM delivery than with a single program. So over 90% of our respondents indicated that IDSM portfolio benefits include compliance with regulatory mandates to offer IDSM, and the ability to increase the number of demand-side measures that are capable of optimizing a customer's end-use consumption, which is a pretty big one. Over 80% of the respondents agreed that reducing the market confusion around customers might experience about the different demand-side program and market offerings is a key motivator for IDSM, because they can do it collectively. And then approximately 2/3 of our respondents indicated that IDSM can improve cost effectiveness of program delivery, and another 75% stated that IDSM can create customer engagement and satisfaction. So in contrast to our inquiry about the utility motivations for pursuing IDSM, the utility respondents were much less unified about what, in their assessment of what benefits have been achieved. So since the survey instrument allowed customers, we had a check all that apply. Our findings suggest that utilities are not capturing all the benefits and that IDSM is purported to provide. So for example, we had about 8 respondents that indicated that their utility was motivated by the opportunity to improve the program delivery cost effectiveness, but only 5 stated that benefits had actually been achieved. So furthermore, 9 respondents expected IDSM would increase customer engagement, but only 6 believed that their efforts had actually resulted in an increased customer participation. So clearly there's still some barriers that exist that are limiting the effectiveness of a utility's IDSM efforts. And so since practitioners can identify so many motivators for implementing IDSM programs, why hasn't there more been done? So that was
Jenny,
sure.
I'm going to actually stop you for a second. Also, I'd like to apologize for folks that we're hearing the beeps when people enter and leave, and I'm trying to figure out how to turn that off, but I'm not having success, so apologies for that. And Jenny, there's a question about motivation to IDSM, so I thought I would stop you there. Manuel asks, is there any market-oriented motivation to implement IDSM? And we can probably talk a little bit about our ESCO experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just briefly.
So, yeah, we'll just touch on that really quickly. In fact, this section of the presentation was not included in the report, so this is special to the webinar. We worked with and talked with several ESCOs and talked about their efforts in moving beyond just energy efficiency, because that's what they're known for. And there is a lot of interest within the market to move into the DR space, but there's some pretty it's a different learning curve, and the access to those types of programs aren't as easy to come by, because they are typically managed closely by the utility. And so there's a learning curve kind of moving into that space, but we do see a lot of the ESCOs working with solar and thinking about solar implementation with batteries. And so there is some movement and some push from the ESCOs, but what's required really is going to be some market transformation in terms of collaboration between program administrators and ESCOs. But I do think ESCOs, the bottom line that they indicated is their job is to save their customers as much money as possible. And so if they can do that through a portfolio of demand-side management measures, then they would love to do that. But the incentives need to be there, and they need to be available for ESCOs to basically implement those kind of programs. And so that's going to be something that has to be developed and really kind of massaged as we move into the future.
And there has to be, demand on the part of the customers to do that sort of integration. It has to pencil out, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
There's one more question. Manuel asks, and I think you're going to answer it in this next section, so we won't answer it now, but his question is, what is impeding utilities to gather the value from IDSM? So you're going to talk about the barriers.
You're right. Thank you, Manuel, because you teed that up perfectly, so I appreciate that. So we did. We asked our respondents to indicate a specific level of significance associated with the list of regulatory barriers to offering or expanding IDSM programs and portfolios. And so that's really what we'll talk through now, because there is some challenges for utilities to gather the value from IDSM and to really roll it out, and those are listed here. I'm going to begin with discussing separate and distinct program budgets for EE, DG, DR, and storage. So the respondents told us that separate and distinct program budgets created a number of challenges for their IDSM activities. The persistent barrier was a constant struggle between timing and the funding cycles. When the regulatory funding cycle for each DSM program is not aligned with the other, such as like a 3-year cycle that don't coincide, funding for IDSM programs can be and projects can be problematic. So a customer may be looking at a project holistically, where they're doing multiple measures and be seeking rebates or incentives for specific EE technologies that they're able to receive because there's funds within that pool. But then there are no funds available for the DR incentives because that funding cycle has expired. So that mismatch presents some barriers to being able to execute these types of programs successfully. So many states, in addition, have established separate funding sources and programmatic budgets for the different DSM resources, such as I mentioned, and so delivering them from that standpoint is challenging. So it's unlikely without integrating some of these funding sources from the different program budgets that it's difficult to see that there would be a clear benefit to their portfolio if they did integrate with DSM program without having sort of the marrying of some type of the budget or the cycle, the 3-year cycle, sorry. So I just got hung up there. Rah! So but yeah, so this is the most significant barrier that was identified. And next was, and this is also a significant barrier and identified by our respondents, that the conducting evaluation, measurement, and a verification, and determining the success or the performance of the different IDSM programs is challenging, because there's many different measures and programs that are interacting with each other. So you have energy efficiency, and DR can erode some of that. EE can erode some of the DR efficiency in some of the portfolios. And so how to mix and manage the interaction of the measures that are being implemented together has presented a challenge throughout the industry. So estimating IDSM success or the impact in a framework that's useful for planning and policy development in a manner that the programs differ from one another, well, within regards to the metrics for the measure lifetimes, for their capacity, for their energy savings, their durability. So far, there's no common approach to doing valuation or cost effectiveness, so that crosses those disciplines. So instead, there's been methods that have been developed for each particular DSM technology, and those are typically applied independently. And so that's not really giving it the full bang for the buck. And next, we asked our respondents to identify the significance of several barriers that might be within the program administrator's purview to address. So the other ones were focusing more on regulatory issues. These are program administrators. Demand-side management programs are typically implemented and managed by business units organized around end-use technologies. And there may be very little coordination between program managers within the organization that would integrate the various DSM program silos. So the program administrators that we interviewed and we talked to within this study have dedicated business units that deliver distributed generation, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, or DR. They're all in individual groups or departments, or in what we call as silos. Each of these business units is responsible for planning the program activities, obtaining approval for incentives and rebates, and marketing, education and outreach, and then administration of the programs. And these program silos can really present a challenge when there's internal barriers that prohibit or limit the collaborative marketing, the collaborative administration, and pooling of resources that could enhance the delivery of integrated demand-side management. So that is really the top one there. And then we have we focused on the technological interoperability and controllability of different measures and devices, in particular IDSM devices. And most respondents agreed that they needed to support the industry as well as internal efforts to advance interoperability and controllability of the IDSM measures. In order to be successful in expanding these opportunities within their service territories. So they're automated energy management technologies that are part of an IDSM portfolio. They do have the potential for managing energy consumption temporally and geographically for all customer sectors. And automating efficient end uses that can respond to price signals and market signals with little or no disruption to customers are very promising opportunities. However, with the constraints on some of the interoperability and the controllability of these solutions, there's been some barriers created to mass deployment, and that was indicated by our survey respondents. Great. So now, given the barriers that we just discussed, we asked the utilities to identify, and the third-party administrators, to identify what has been done to capture benefits to overcome these barriers. And so during our survey, we identified a number of activities that program administrators and implementers could take, and we sought their assessment on how many of them had been done. And so we list those here. I'm going to go into detail on a few of them in the next couple of slides. So the most commonly reported activity from our program administrator participants, this was 8 out of 10, or 11, I apologize, that it was that the responsibilities for delivering some demand-side management technologies has been consolidated and to one or a smaller number of departments within the organization. By building dedicated IDSM business units, program administrators can create a group of DSM experts that are well-versed in all of the DSM offerings and can recommend integrated solutions. So really that's an excellent one that we'd like to see more integration. So while utilities are making some strides in integrating DSM program activities, there are still challenges presented by those program silos. As we mentioned, the program silos can limit the knowledge transfer of customer DSM opportunities, making the impact of the portfolio of DSM programs less effective overall. So as utilities integrate and consolidate DSM departments, that's really when we can see innovative program development occur. And next, we focused on several utilities that indicated that time-based rates are necessary for a program. And they are, even though they may not be a program, they are the basis for many programs, so such as distributed generation, if you're trying to send price signals to storage, in particular, demand response for time-based rates. Time-based rates are fundamental for demand response, and then electric vehicles and storage. In order to get customers sending the right price signals to customers that encourage a shift in consumption, along with the IDSM measure, can contribute to accelerating IDSM. It really does. I think that as utilities move towards IDSM portfolios, they're also moving their time-based rates and rate making to help facilitate the desired type of demand-side response from customers, and that's a really important component. So several utilities also indicated that developing education and marketing collateral for IDSM can be challenging because of the way that it's funded. However, because it's funded through separate DSM programs. But however, those challenges have been are there. There have been several utilities that report, about 4 out of the 11, that reported that they have been able to combine some of their funds to develop marketing materials and education campaigns for multiple technologies and IDSM technologies. So let's see, and then so only 2. This one is interesting. So only 2 utilities reported that funding for some of the DSM programs have been consolidated and integrated. This is allowing, for greater ability to offer integrated technologies and measures under one program budget. Since integrated funding was the most cited barrier to implementing IDSM, it's really not surprising that so few utilities have reported headway on this issue. It does appear that regulatory reforms are not being pursued and maybe ought to be pursued, or that the difficulty in implementing IDSM programs or those reforms is delaying the process. So the program administrators who responded to our survey provided their own assessment of how IDSM efforts could be expanded. We began with, we inquired about the importance of the various opportunities for external, and meaning, or for example, regulatory or legislative entities to promote increased deployment of IDSM based on the assumption that program administrators' own internal efforts might need to be augmented with regulatory changes. Respondents did indicate that the most significant opportunities for regulatory reform would address separate and distinct program budgets and effective metrics for evaluating cost effectiveness and regulatory rules for EM&B. respondents did cite that the establishment of standardized cost-effectiveness metrics were, for IDSM is a critical component for increasing the program delivery of IDSM. Approximately half of the respondents indicated that it was high importance. To date, really, the program administrators contend that there are really no common approaches to valuation or of cost effectiveness that have been successfully established for programs that cross disciplines. And this is presenting challenges for them as they seek to develop cost effectiveness tests for IDSM portfolios and project screening. Almost all of our respondents agreed that a single source of funding for IDSM programs, coupled with overarching goals for IDSM that focus on desired grid outcomes, could further advance the innovation, design, and implementation of IDSM programs. The current structure of the separate and distinct DSM program budgets is considered a barrier to expanding IDSM, since funds from multiple programs must be pooled to deliver integrated measures. So even with the limited coordination, the attribution of program costs and program performance becomes complicated, and this results in program administrators typically avoiding such program complications. Dedicated IDSM program budgets are one of many components necessary for the deployment of IDSM programs. So we really kind of repetitive throughout this, this report is we found that, that funding is important, and having pooled administrative activities and pooled resources that really can help accelerate IDSM, and that's a desired outcome here. So almost all of the respondents, the respondents were also asked to select their perceived importance of each of the three specified opportunities here. And most of them agreed that the dedicated and administrative and program implementation activities is one of the biggest opportunities. And 8 of the respondents indicated that they had already undertaken some internal reorganization to consolidate the demand-side management program areas, although a majority of the respondents indicated that there remained ample opportunity for further reorganization. And we're good at that. So specifically, more than 2/3 of the respondents indicated that established dedicated IDSM administrative resources and program implementation activities within their organization was of the highest importance for expanding IDSM portfolios, while another third indicated that it was of medium and significant importance. Go to technological advancements in interoperability and controllability. Most respondents agreed that they needed to support the industry as well as internal efforts for advancing interoperability and controllability of IDSM measures in order to successfully expand these opportunities. Constraints on interoperability and controllability of automated solutions have created some barriers, but yet a lot of these program administrators have the power of the purse. They're capable of motivating technology vendors to adapt resources and interfaces to help better manage some of these technologies under for example a DRMS or a demand response management system. The use of open communications such as open ADR can help facilitate interoperability and controllability, and this is becoming increasingly common for manufacturers of enabling technologies to include these types of communication standards within their product equipment. And so that's one thing that organizations can work on with technology vendors to establish protocols and open standard criteria. So next, we asked the program administrators who participated in our study to continue and to consider what might be a specific mix of measures and technologies that have the most potential for adoption in the DSM portfolio in the near future. And so we focused first on commercial and industrial IDSM programmatic opportunities, and those are listed up here. I'll speak to several of them. Retro commissioning programs were cited as being a very promising area for IDSM, and for many reasons, as you can imagine. Retro commissioning begins with an audit of an entire facility to determine the equipment and envelope measures that would need to be addressed. And the IDSM opportunities for retro commissioning can offer incentives for EE measures, such as lighting retrofits, building automation and upgrades, HVAC improvements, variable frequency drives, as well as demand response technologies, and even distributed generation where applicable. Additionally, building automation systems or commercial or BAS or energy management control systems, EMS, are computerized control systems that regulate the energy consumption of a building by controlling the operation of the end uses within the building, such as the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lighting, and even hot water heating systems. So this creates numerous opportunities for more efficient operations including control during DR events and response to time-based rates. So many opportunities with that type of technology. And additionally, we asked about what might the program administrators see as the ideal candidates over the next 10 years for residential programs. And the response was the 5 you see listed here. We selected the top 5. One is smart solar inverters. That came up quite frequently. These inverters are capable of sending and receiving data from the utility and third-party aggregator systems, and they provide advanced grid functions such as a ramp rate control, power curtailment, fault ride-through, and voltage support. So pretty smart inverters. And then we have grid integrated water heaters. Those are becoming increasingly popular, and we're seeing more and more pilots rolled out with those. Then these grid integrated water heaters add bidirectional control to electric resistant water heaters, and they're capable of allowing the utility or third-party aggregator to rapidly or repeatedly turn them on or off and incrementally ramp their power up and down. And this is done without the customer. It's seamless to the customer. They don't experience any change in their water temperature at all. So it's a real behind the curtain kind of DSM measure, but it can create opportunities to use them as thermal storage, and then also respond to dispatch signals for demand response, as well as offering some energy efficiency improvements. So I'm going to give an example of one of my favorite utilities, and that's SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. They have been incredibly innovative in their program offerings, and I'm providing an example. They started targeting customers that already have solar on their rooftops and offering them with smart thermostats and storage as a strategy to manage the grid impacts and the high penetration of rooftop solar within their service territory. The program administrator, SMUD, also aspires to develop IDSM programs to customers which combine solar, storage, DR, and TBR, and time-based rates. And this really does have the potential to defer distribution upgrades in their service territory. They've done some reorganization throughout their organization to really get behind an IDSM type service, a business model, so that they're really starting to integrate these different types of services along with measures and delivering them in a way that IDSM can integrate technologies and provide solutions to the customers that are fairly specific, such as those ones that already have solar on their rooftop. Let's offer them this port package of DSM options. And so they're really leading the way in terms of IDSM. And so, to some concluding thoughts, the 8 program administrators that comprised 11 survey respondents raised that the key value drivers for IDSM include the ability to deliver more and a broader range of demand-side technology combinations and services that are capable of optimizing customers' end-use energy consumption, so behind-the-meter energy consumption. So the opportunity for increased customer engagement and some satisfaction was noted also as a really important benefit. And then, of course, compliance with regulatory mandates. Over half of the respondents indicated that IDSM opportunities have the potential to help address distribution and, in some cases, bulk power system needs by providing targeted, locational, and temporal controllability and or energy reduction of energy consuming devices. So, for example, energy, and just an example here is Evergreen Economics studied the outcomes in California for IDSM customer participants that compared to customers that participated only in an energy efficiency program. The study found that the customers who installed EE as part of an IDSM program, so in this case solar plus energy efficiency, that they were more satisfied with the performance of their EE improvements than those that did the energy efficient improvements alone. So from the perspective of those program administrators who participated in our study, deployment of the more complex IDSM programs over the next few years could be expected. The cost for IDSM measures, namely PV and smart inverters, battery storage, even electric vehicles, is declining and making them more attractive to customers as well as to the utilities. And this can help encourage IDSM program participation in the coming years. However, the respondents also identified and prioritized barriers that may limit their ability to expand IDSM offerings. And so overall, we recognize that it will require both internal and external leadership to adequately address and overcome these barriers and subsequently capture some of these benefits that IDSM can enable. So with that, I'm done.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. We did have a couple of questions come in. Manuel Villavicencio, if I said that right, asks, other than the funding issues for utilities, combined funding and budgets, what about new business models as energy service companies, e.g. virtual power plants? I guess, virtual power plants is sort of that two-way exchange between the end use and the utility, and I think you kind of outlined that a bit in what SMUD is doing, right?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Liz. I think, virtual power plants are certainly, I would put them under the category of IDSM as long as it's, as long as you're sort of coupling. To me, when I think about a virtual power plant, I think about it being comprised of a battery, generally photovoltaics, and probably some, they're enrolled in demand response, some type of demand response where they're providing a grid service such as frequency regulation or regulating reserves. And then also there's some time-based rates that are going along with that. So a virtual power plant is absolutely an excellent example of an integrated approach to delivering demand-side management. And there are new business models that are emerging, and I would expect that we would see more of those come about in coming years as we see these renewable portfolio standards ramp up and around the country, and we are seeing that. So we're going to have to get creative about how we're working with not only how we're producing energy and in a distributed manner, but how we're also managing it on the demand side. And virtual power plants are an excellent example of how to do that. It's all about the automation and the integration.
Great, thanks. And then Ted Jones asks, for the recommended measures, which you talked about a bit a couple slides ago, were there some good examples of bundles of IDSM measures like SMUD? I think you talked a bit about how SMUD was doing a great job combining those. So maybe you can recap. Or are there other good examples besides SMUD?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, we can. This is a very forward, because I really raised the bar with our definition of IDSM as being 3 or more measures. We are being creative, right? We're being aspirational in this, and so utilities are thinking along these lines of working with this. I think grid integrated hot water heaters, for example, are an example of an IDSM measure because it's actually complete. It's and same thing. Well, not complete entirely, but when you couple technologies that are more efficient and are enabled with controls along with a time-based rate to customers to motivate or send that signal to customers, we're talking IDSM. And so it can be a hot water heater that's being used as battery storage, that's also participating, and not battery storage, thermal storage. So it's thermal storage. It's able to respond to demand response signal. It's typically, the customer can be on a time-based rate, and oftentimes the equipment is more efficient than you would get with a typical water heater. So with one device, you're able to accomplish a multitude of different DSM objectives and capitalize on that. I think electric vehicles, and another one example, bundling there would be PG&E's IBMW Forward program. They piloted an EV, an electric vehicle pilot that used electric vehicles and stationary electric vehicle batteries with demand response signals and rates that was exemplary and had excellent outcomes. There's a report available, and if you look at the report, and this report in particular, it cites that report that was published by PG&E. But they did an excellent job of orchestrating a distributed network of batteries using demand response signals and incentives and time-based rates in order to create an IDSM program that utilizes electric vehicles. So there's a lot of the non-wires alternatives programs that are going out and collecting as many demand-side measures as possible to address some of the grid concerns. As those types of initiatives become more integrated and include more measures than just, say, lighting, and now we're using time-based rates and we're using control signals, those are going to, we're going to see a lot more of those types of programs come to fruit, come to the table, and basically demonstrate how IDSM can really work, I think, in the future.
Great. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Ted.
All right, we have about less than a minute left. Any other final quick questions? All right, I think that's it. Thanks, everyone, so much. Thanks, Pete and Jenny. And we didn't post the link here, but if you want to go to the report, you can go to emp.lbl.gov and look under the publications, under the energy efficiency publications, and find it, plus a lot of other interesting reports. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.